well, most of you taking your seats already. Hello everyone. Evening. Hello everyone. Evening. Welcome to this our September UX meetup. I'm going to keep this intro brief. You don't want to hear from me, and I'm sure you're all excited to come to our star attraction tonight, which is in the shape of Andy over there. There he is. And Andy will be talking to us today about the power of karaoke, amongst other things. I'm pretty excited to hear what he's got to say on that. But before I turn it to you, Andy, I'd just like to say some thanks. It might not have escaped your attention, but we're in a brand new venue tonight, Standard Life HQ, part of the Phoenix Group. First time here, hopefully not our last. I guess we'll find out a little bit more about that at the end of the night. But thanks very much. Just like to say thanks very much to the team here. So to Hillary, who's, I don't think, she's around there, isn't she? And Lindsay, yeah. So Hillary's just around the corner, because if any of you need to leave tonight early, you'll need to be escorted out. So she's just kind of perched over there. So don't worry, if you need to leave, you'll see her out there. While I'm on this subject, toilets are also out there. And if you hear the fire alarm, it's real fire, unless it's a malfunction. So thanks to Hillary and the team. Done a lot of really hard work behind the scenes, kind of making this happen and shuttling people backwards and forwards, etc., etc. So thank you very much. Big thanks also over there at the back to Alan from Product Forge, who is kindly donating his time and his expertise tonight, sort of making this event kind of available to people beyond those sitting in this room. And I've already heard from a couple of people tonight how grateful they are, because they can't be here, but they will be watching from the comfort of their home. So thank you very much, Alan. I think that's it from me. Thanks to you all for coming as well, of course. I'm going to hand straight over to Andy now. Over to you. Let the show roll on.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can we have a round of applause for Mike and the organisers at UX Edinburgh? And Alan at Product Forge at the back there, because we didn't do any rounds of applause. So let's do rounds of applause for Product Forge. There you go. And also for Phoenix Group. And for Standard Life, I'm not sure. Alan, am I okay in the microphone? All right, cool. Hello, this is my talk. It is the first time I'm doing this. It's a bit of a work in progress, so you can see that as you being the guinea pigs and that being a problem, or you can see it as a world premiere. It's up to you, really. But this is supposedly what it's about. It kind of morphs from a day-to-day standpoint. So a little bit about me first. Like, how do I, in theory, know what I'm talking about? So I started off as a designer quite a long time ago now, in the depths of 2004, actually probably more like 1998 in Front Page, Microsoft Front Page. Worked at a magazine, freelanced, worked at an agency, Storm ID, with a couple of these fine folks down at the front here, doing all sorts of web and print and then product design to some extent. And then over the last sort of 8 years, I've kind of moved into leadership. Started as a product designer at FanDuel, which I'm sure some of you in Edinburgh will have heard of, and then kind of worked my way up to eventually be VP of UX and design there. Left in 2022, did 18 months at Trustpilot, and now I am doing a 6-month stint as the interim VP of design at a company called Clio, which is an AI-first fintech. All the buzzwords tonight. It's going to be beautiful. And genuinely is a pioneer of conversational UI that supports people throughout their financial journey, which sounds, yeah, fine, whatever. This is the important bit to me. This is what we're trying to do, is empower people to build a life beyond the paycheck. You can see a lot more on the website if you're interested. I won't go too far into the product today, but you can see some of the UI. It's not all chat and conversation focused, but there is a large part of that. There's a very nice tone of voice. There's roast mode, which people really like, which just goes right at you for your Uber Eats spend in the month, and so on. And it's been a lot of fun so far. I'm a couple of months in there as well. So done a lot of different things over the last 15 to 20 odd years in design and UX at some point. As I said, this is new talk. I'm just trying it out. This is pretty short. It's relatively high level because actually what I want to do is get into questions and examples and yeah, but that's not going to work for me, so, and that type of thing. And maybe we can do some deep dives on that at some point if I get invited back. We'll see. So we'll start with all of the fields, right? If you could all read this, and then we're going to do a little experiment, right? So question for you here. Which role causes the most challenges to delivering great products in organizations, right? Product manager, engineer, designer, researcher, data analyst. Okay, now I want you all to close your eyes. Come on, close your eyes. No biases here. Product manager, put your hands up. Engineer, put your hands up. Designer, put your hands up. Researcher, put your hands up. Data analyst, put your hands up. One person for data analyst. What have you got against data analyst? Seriously, that's a little harsh. The answer is you're all wrong. We're all as bad as each other. And the fact that you have all sat there and gone, well, it's this person and that person and this happened and that person has stifled my creativity is part of the problem that we're talking about here, right? So I'm gonna take you to a place called LinkedIn. It's going to be okay, right? You've all seen these before, right? UX doesn't have a seat at the table, and the company doesn't understand it, man, and nobody gets me, and nothing's ever going to change, and all of this, right? Teams should care about users, all of these kind of things. You've heard it all before. But it's just a little bit teenage emo, is it not? And believe, like, no judgment, right? I've been there. These two will tell you. Grumpy, like, these people should care about this client should care about that, this is ridiculous, you know, been there, done that, made all the mistakes. But nothing is ever going to change if that's how we think about things, right? So, it's time for our coming of age movie, right? Complaining about it isn't going to work. Writing negative pieces on Medium or LinkedIn about the state of design isn't going to work. Comparing your situation to some blog post that's manicured about some beautiful company. Remember when Twitter was the whole thing, right? Oh, well, Twitter's design team, they do this. I don't think anyone gives a shit about Twitter's design team right now, right? It's not real. It's only about Twitter if it is real. It doesn't matter, right? None of this is going to help us. It's time to grow up a little bit, right? So in our coming of age movie, we're going to have 5 pivotal scenes here, right? We're going to think in systems. We're going to think about UX maturity. Cash rules everything around me, impacting the organization, collaborating relentlessly, and thinking of UX as creative problem solving and not UX or design or something along those lines. And this is going to become a bit of a theme. You don't need permission to think about the things that we're going to talk about. You don't need permission to go and do the things that we're going to talk about. You don't need to get in people's way. You don't need to like sack off the job you're supposed to be delivering to do something else, but you can find ways to do this stuff. And the only way that this is going to improve in your organization and the only way that you're going to grow is for you to actually figure this stuff out and start pushing forward inch by inch by inch. Because otherwise you're just stuck moaning about life not being fair, and life isn't fair. So, first of all, we're going to think in systems, right? This is something from a few years ago, 2021 it turns out, a couple of years ago now. In a previous life, this is from a retro. It's actually, I think, 3 retros in slightly different subsets of teams taken together and put against a framework that we'll talk about on the right-hand side that you can't really read here, that we'll talk about in a minute. When was the last time, hands up, if your UX organization within the organization you work for, whatever that looks like, whether it's you, whether it's 50 people, whatever, when was the last time you all got together and did a retro? Is it in the last month? Hands up. Quite a few. In the last 6 months? In the last year? Okay, so most people have either done it in the last month or not really at all, right? How are you going to know what the problems are that you're trying to solve within your organization and how to move UX? And UX is a broad church, and I don't want to get into titles and stuff. We've already had this conversation tonight, but let's just use it as that broad church. How are we going to move that forward? You don't know if it's just like this person's moaning about this and this person's upset about this and this stakeholder doesn't believe in this thing, right? Get a retro together. It's not difficult. Get it in Miro if you're all remote, or get it in Post-its. We all love a Post-it. If you're all in person, that's great. Theme it up. Think about what are the themes here that are challenges that we can rise to move UX forward in our organization. And moving on, so the people that put up their hands from who said they've done it in the last month, okay, put your hands up if you said last month, if you've done it in the last month as your team, right? Keep your hand up if you've actioned anything from that. Not very many, right? You've got to keep moving forward, right? So we are systems thinkers. We are user needs gatherers. We are how might we people. Apply it to yourselves. Apply it to your own team. Apply it to your career if you want to. This is 12 Qualities of Effective Organizations. It's from a book that I would really recommend to everybody called Org Design for Design Orgs. It's been around for at least, I would say, 5 years now. Some of it probably reads a little bit out of date, but that's okay. Even if you are not planning to be a manager, a director, a VP, whatever, read that book. There's a lot in it that's very sane about UX and how they sit within a business and all of those types of things. Use this. It's in this slide. You'll see this, like we'll send these out later. It's also in the book. It's online. I think I stole this screenshot from somewhere anyway. And just sit down with your organization and go, right, do we have a shared sense of purpose? No, okay, what are we going to do about that? What about establishing and upholding standards of quality? That's something that I'm actually working in Clio on at the moment. How are we going to do that? Systems thinking, user needs gathering, how might we? It's the same stuff you do with users every day, except you and your stakeholders are now their users. And just a quick reminder, say it with me, you don't need permission, right? Okay, so moving on from that, so you've got some challenges, that's great. We're going to start working through those, and you're going to write them down, and you're going to put them somewhere really prominent for the team, and you're going to assign people to those things, and you're going to think about how you're going to move that forward. That's awesome. What's the next stage after that? Something that's really, really helpful is maturity models, right? Hear this all the time. I'm very, very bored of this. It's nonsense. Please stop saying it. No one cares. No one in your organization cares, okay? You have to earn that seat at the table if that's even a thing, and then you need to figure out what you're going to do with it when you get there, right? Is your organization actually UX mature enough to handle UX, design, whatever, making business decisions alongside product and engineering and marketing and finance and everyone else? Are they? Maybe. Great. But if they're not, how are you going to get there, right? So there are plenty of these out there, plenty of maturity models out there. There's a couple here. Nielsen-Norman group. I can never remember. Classic, right? This is their stages of UX maturity. This has been around a long time. There's a very good blog post around this. There's a lot of supporting documentation. I would really recommend that you go read it. And they talk about it in 6 stages, right? From absent, completely ignored, probably none of you quite work in that scenario, hopefully, because there's at least you, right? Up to like very user-driven, UX and design is beloved, reproducible, and habitual. That's the holy grail. That's the nirvana. This is the other one that I like because these two are pretty simple and pretty well documented. This is from Envision's The New Design Frontier that came out a couple of years ago. Again, lots of documentation around this, well worth reading. This talks about from producers to visionaries, and it's maybe a bit more kind of product company focused, being a little bit newer. You'll see that in visionaries, the size of the sample of the companies that actually are visionaries when it comes to UX maturity is so small. Over 60% is level 1 and level 2. There is no nirvana. It's not coming. It's never coming. So what are we going to do to move ourselves up that chain as best we can? These are some of the factors that get talked about in those maturity models. They're things to start thinking about. UX leadership, do you have that? Do you need it? Are you it? There's a lot of different experience in this room. This stuff is not just for managers or leaders or anyone else. This is for everybody. You could be the only UX person. You could be one of 200. It doesn't matter. Things can get more mature. Things can get better. And you can push that forward and you don't need permission. So strategy, culture. Culture is important. Is there a UX-driven culture, at least within the UX team? Are you all talking to each other? Are the different strands of UX or people kind of in that sphere talking to each other? Doesn't happen as much as you might think. Process is obviously really important. It's something that a business or an organization, I keep saying business, an organization of any kind understands, and it's something where you can start to talk business language, and then outcomes, which we'll talk about a lot more in a second. Also, your view versus their view. When you are doing this, so when I first did this, I sat down and I went through step by step and answered the kind of questions, the headings in the maturity models. I then had all of my stakeholders and the teams adjacent to mine, like engineering and product management and those kind of people, also answer those questions. Because some things you think are super mature are actually not, and vice versa. The company maybe thinks they're like the pinnacle of UX, and you're sitting there going, I mean, we've barely touched the surface, right? Where's the expectation gap? Find that expectation gap so you can have that conversation and start to bridge those gaps. That's the way that you're going to mature UX within an organization as opposed to on its own. Coming back to this again, once you've got to that maturity model, you want to get your retros going, you want to get your sessions going. How might we? What are we going to do here? What are the user needs? What are the possible solutions? How are we going to prototype those solutions? And then how are we going to iterate on them? And how are we going to know if they're successful? It's exactly the same as building product. Exactly the same. And have goals. I'll come back to this again. Like, how many of you had a retro in the last month who've actually moved forward with any of that stuff? You can't just have these meetings and not have actions come out of the back of them. It happens all the time. It happens on a daily basis for me at the moment. Actually not with the team that I lead, but like with cross-functional teams. No actions out of the back of it. Drives me nuts. Nothing is ever going to change if you don't have those actions. And if you don't stand up and go, right, I'm going to do something hard. I don't need permission. I'm just going to figure it out and go for it. Because you don't need permission. I think the other thing is like, what's right for you in this scenario? When you're talking about maturity models, you start talking about strategy and leadership and management and some of those things. And you may be in a really small team and it doesn't really need that, or you might be in a really big team and it already has that. But starting to think, where in these maturity models do you want to be in your career personally? Like, if you don't want to be sitting doing my job, which is like 10% talking about design and UX and 90% everything else, like profit and loss and hiring plans and process and signing off budgets and looking 6 to 12 months into the future and then having me be accountable for the success or failure of that, don't do it, right? Careful with what you wish for. Find another path. There are different paths. It doesn't have to be that path. I love it. I never thought I would, but I do. But you've got to be really, really careful about that. There are lots of things within that maturity model, whether it's design systems, design ops, data-driven design that's maybe more data-driven than the rest of the team for some specific reason. There are niches, there's management, there's individual contributor. There's a lot of things that we can do here. Cash rules everything around me. Impact in the organization, this is where it's actually going to count. So you've had your retros, you've figured out what's bugging you all. That's great, you're moving forward with that. You've thought about how mature your organization is in terms of UX. You're thinking about how to move forward there, how to work with stakeholders, how to improve their reputation or the understanding of UX or whatever it is that you're thinking about. But none of that actually matters if you can't impact the organization. So UX is a part of the organization, for better or worse, right? And sometimes, we're the Trojan horse inside the organization. We're fighting a good fight, yeah. Come on, man. No, calm the fuck down, please. Like, please stop. Okay, it's not real. It's really, really not. And if you can't measure UX impact on the organization and the organizational goals, then why should anyone give you more time, money, people, anything to do with that, right? This is hard work, really, really complicated hard work, but it gets you to the point where people actually understand what you're trying to do and why you're here and what the return on investment is from a company or an organization point of view for the UX team. As an aside, I was talking to somebody recently who's a very smart person who runs a sort of service design agency. And we were talking about a lot of design teams, UX teams over the last sort of 10 years. There's been this bull run in the market, tech's just growth, 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 teams are going. And there's been a lot of teams that have measured their worth on how many people they have in the team, what's the size of their team. How's that working out for them now? No, not very well. Because if that's your measure of success, it's not gonna work for you. Bad times will come at any point and you're gonna have to justify what impact you're having. Do it right. Industry best practical, I'll start that again. Industry best practice articles will only get you so far. This is a thing that we like to do, right? There's this article, look at this new way of doing things. Look at this perfect utopian way of building product or finding user needs or doing some kind of research or designing whatever it is, right? Nobody in the organization outside of you really cares or understands. And they all find it very, very easy, understandably, because we're humans, to say, yeah, but this place is different, right? And I mean, they're right, but that's not going to get you to where you need to get to. You need to talk about impact. You need to find ways to show that impact in the business. This is a thing where I thought there was maybe somebody here who used this, but there's not. This was from one of the companies I worked in, and we were trying to explain to people goals, right? It's difficult. You get in a company, some companies have got loads of goals and stuff, some don't, some have OKRs, some don't. There's all this confusion. What are we trying to do here? And the way I like to think about it is boiling it down to two parts, right? One is professional development goals, which is I want to grow as a researcher, a designer, a writer, whatever it is. I want to learn this skill. I want to learn to prototype in Framer. I want to learn about product thinking, et cetera, right? I'm going to grow to be a senior researcher, say, right? That's really, really important stuff because that's growth and that's got ambient value for the company. And they do know that, even though they don't act like it sometimes. But the other side of that is what I call contribution goals, right? You as a person, and we'll get there. A lot of companies are not there. A lot of the companies or organizations, that people work for in this room aren't going to have this level of detail yet. But this should be what you strive towards, at least, where you have personal contribution goals that ladder up to the team, the department, the product you're working on, and ultimately they all ladder up to the company. So you can say, this piece of work I'm doing is going to have this impact, hopefully, and that's going to impact product XYZ, which impacts whatever the top 3 objectives are in the company. If you can't point to that line all the way up and down, it's not going to end with real impact. This is hard, it's scary, it feels like you're putting your head on a chopping block and saying, I am responsible for company success, but you are partially, tinily, actually accountable for pushing the organization forward. We all know that better user experiences lead to better outcomes, right? We do, right? We all believe that. You're gonna have to prove it though. Can you prove it? In your organization right now, can you actually prove how that's happening? I actually can't. I'm 8 weeks in a job, so give me a chance, right? But right this second, I can't. It's hard. It's very, very difficult. So anyway, you're going to have to show how you're going to impact those organizational goals through UX initiatives. I put a very simple example up there, right? An organization's goal, one of their goals is to increase user retention by 20%, say, right? So everyone's talking about pricing changes and new features, and we're going to do product marketing campaigns, and we're going to do CRM, and we're going to pull people back in with push notifications. Fucking push notifications, right? But actually, if you take a step back, if you know fine well what the organization's goals are, and you're really, really clear on it, you as a team or as an individual can take a step back and go, actually, I think there's Y% of a retention increase just from improving what we have today and reducing friction. This bit, this bit, and this bit, I can see they're broken, even if I don't have the research and the data to prove it yet, but I will. That's where people go, oh, right. So we don't need to charge less money, you're saying, right? But that's scary. So you're gonna have to stand up and say, yeah, I can do that. I really think I can do that. And that's pretty scary stuff. But you're gonna have to do it or nothing is going to change, right? So how do you do that, right? You don't really know about business, right? I speak to designers all the time. I don't wanna be a manager, so I don't really need to know about the business. Please stop that, please, right? You can't be a designer or a UX person in an organization if you don't understand the organization and what it's trying to do and how it does that. This piece here, this business and strategy, and along with all these other pieces, is going to make you a much better UX person. This is a product designer one from UX Studio team. This business and strategy piece here. Think about this shape. If you haven't seen these before, there's a lot. There's a guy called Jason Mezut who has a lot of stuff online called the Shape of Designers, I think, or Shape of Design, something like that, about looking at competency maps and how you think about that and how you start to expand out your competency to round out your skills and where you're going to get really deep into the knowledge and where you're going to go much wider. Really, really important stuff, because you can't push forward with aligning UX goals to business goals or organization goals if you don't understand the organization. This is hard. But do you know who is doing this? Marketing, sales, product management, engineering, whichever other departments you have in your organization, they've all been doing this for years to some extent. We're lagging behind on this. You can't do it all on your own, right? So we're going to have to collaborate. I'm not a big fan of the word family when it comes to work, by the way, but it works with this thing, your chosen family, so we're going to have to do it. If a company says that we're a family, run a fucking mile. Please run a mile. They will use it to screw you eventually. They will. They absolutely will. It's all about people. People is what we are doing here, right? We're building things for people. We're building things with people. You cannot do this in isolation. You cannot be that person who doesn't want to go to meetings and just wants to sit with their headphones on. Like, nobody wants to work with that guy. Nobody. That is not going to advance UX maturity or UX impact in your organization. We are here to produce great outcomes and experiences for our users. That's it. That's the job. We are not here to stroke your ego. We are not here to do things perfectly. We are not here to do things like Twitter, that's for sure. We are here to produce great outcomes for you and experiences for our users. That is what we go to work to do. Nothing else matters. This is a book that is like I think 90s, maybe early 2000s business book. It's called Crucial Conversations. It's got 4 authors, so I won't go into it. Not a book that I thought would have a massive impact on my life, and it really, really, really did. I would just recommend it for absolutely anybody in any line of work, also anyone with a partner or children or any of those things, right? It's like that FBI, what's the FBI hostage negotiator book? I forget the name. Apparently that's very good for parenting, so there you go. You have to work with people. You have to work harder than most people in the room all the time, because you're the only person probably in that meeting from a UX background, right? There's a good chance. There's going to be 3 engineers. There's going to be a senior PM and a junior PM. There's going to be 15 people from marketing, always. Every time there's a meeting, there's 15 of them. Don't know why. I love you marketing people. Love my marketing people. I have a marketing design team in my current role as well. You are going to have to be the ambassador for UX every single time, and that sucks. That isn't fair. But life isn't fair. This is the job you chose. You get paid pretty well for it. What are you going to do about it? I won't go into all of these. Right now, there's a whole book. I would really, really, really recommend it. Some of the examples are pretty funny because they're like 90s, 2000s examples, but the rest of it is unbelievably good. But basically, starting with heart is the big part of it. How are we all going to sit down and get to what we need to get to? How can I understand what your challenges are and try and help you in the same way that I expect you to help me? And how do we get to great user experiences for our users? That's all we're trying to get to here. Making it safe, stating your path, being very clear about what you're trying to achieve, all those types of things. There's a lot in here. I'm not going to go into it just now, but it's really, really worth reading. Yes, and I'm sure you've all seen this before, not new. Designers especially, we're a lovely bunch. Very good at saying no to things, have a bit of a reputation in many organizations for saying no to things. We're doing it for the right reasons a lot of the time, but it's not collaborative and it's not going to get you the buy-in and the collaboration that you're looking for. Change it to the yes and. Again, how might we? It's a thing that we use all the time, how might we sessions. So if you can only say yes and to any idea that comes out in a meeting, how can you build on that? How can you say, how might we do that? Oh, that's interesting. How might we do that? How might that impact this other thing that you're not thinking about, by the way? It's really, really important. When I first heard this, I was like, no, I can't do that. It's just not me. See, when you do it, the power of it is unbelievable because people know that you want to collaborate, that you don't think that you have better ideas, even when it comes to UX, than anyone else in the room. This is the last piece of work I ever actually executed on and delivered. It's about 5 years ago now, Super Bowl of 2018, I'm going to say. This was 30 minutes at a whiteboard with a whole team of people that had been assembled about 2 days before. So there was, I'm going to say, 3 Android, 3 iOS, 2 backend, a business analyst, me, and an engineering lead in that room. We all stood at that whiteboard. I'm drawing things. People are shouting out, going, no, we can't do that piece because it's going to take too long. We have a deadline. The BA is slapping up like, oh, touch your screen, I'm sorry. Slapping up Post-it notes with questions and all that kind of stuff. But everybody was involved in that design process. Some of these flows did not come from me. I was the designer in the room. They didn't come from me. They came from engineers. Do you know how quickly we managed to deliver that? Because everybody was bought into that process. The power of that, if you can do it, is unbelievable. It's not always easy. Nothing is easy. Life isn't fair. And if all else fails, karaoke. That's really my only karaoke reference, sorry. No, it's not. It's to collaborate with your teams, right? So you may be a UX person that's outside of like a delivery team, for instance. Sometimes you'll be embedded, sometimes you won't. There's probably lots of different experiences in this room. It's not easy. Anything you can do to work more closely with the people who are going to be delivering on your research, your designs, your whatever, is going to make things much better. They're going to understand you. You're going to understand them. You're going to understand some of their challenges. They're going to understand some of yours. Take them to lunch if you can, or sit them down, offer to sit down and all have lunch together. Don't take them to lunch and pay for it. They're not worth it, right? Karaoke, organize a lunch and learn, do something. You're going to have to do something, because if you're feeling out there and away from the action, that's not going to change unless you make it change. There's like 6 of them, 10 of them, who knows how many of them in a team. They don't really need to be with you. They don't need to make that effort. You need to make that effort. Life isn't fair. I think the other thing about karaoke, right? So half of you in this room are all excited, like, ooh, karaoke. Yes. Gav, what's your karaoke song? He's the other half. Rashmi, what's your karaoke song?
What a Wonderful World.
What a Wonderful World, right, there you go. So half of you are like, yeah, I'm going to do karaoke, this is awesome. The other half of you are like, oh, no. I'm not going anywhere near that mic, I don't understand what's happening, I don't like it, I'm an introvert, this is all too much for me, etc., etc. I haven't had nearly enough to drink. The same is true for the people you're working with, the engineers, the PMs, the stakeholders. Half of them are like, design today, yes, Post-its, come on. The other half are like either like, design, okay, whatever. Or they're like, what if they realize that I can't draw? What if they realize that I don't really know what I'm talking about? What if they ask hard questions again? Because they're like that, they ask those hard questions, right? You got to find ways to get through that. You got to find the song. You got to find their song to bring them up to the stage. There's your karaoke bit. You are welcome. Last bit on working with people and collaborating. UX cannot be a black box. It's a black box in so many organizations. It's viewed as a black box in so many more. People are like, brief goes in, work comes out, don't understand. They all go off in a room and there's Post-its and they do things and then they ask me hard questions. I don't know, right? You've got to overshare, over-communicate, right? So this is from when I worked at FanDuel a couple of years ago, found it the other day, and I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. We actually sat down and had an exercise with the design, or the UX and design team saying, okay, what are we trying to optimize for in our communications and our meetings, right? I wouldn't take a photo of that. It's the ugliest slide I've ever seen, and it's not right. But anyway, so if you think of stream as squad or cross-functional team or whatever, that's what we call them, streams. We're thinking there's a product and development focus, right? We need to get together with our team. We need to think from a product and an engineering standpoint. Are these designs? Is this research? Is this what we're trying to do? And that push-pull and that agreement, right? There's also outreach. How do we help people understand what's going on in UX and design at FanDuel? Because they don't know. And this is an organization that went from 250 people when I joined to 2,500 when I left. I went from 7 designers to 52 designers, researchers, writers, managers. Like, things are ballooning. We went through 2 mergers. Like, there's all these people coming in with different experience, right? We need to outreach to those people. We need to also think about the focus of our craft, whatever that craft is, whether it's research, whether it's design, whatever it is. We need to learn from each other. We need to celebrate the wins and the great work that's going on. We need to give some information out. And we also need to make sure that some of these UX people are getting the recognition in the wider company. And we actually sat down and we optimized all of our ceremonies, our meetings, or reviews, whatever you want to call them, to do exactly that. And that meant that, you probably can't tell from here, people were showing work, whether it's research or design or whatever, they were showing it 3 or 4 times in exactly the same state. And they did not enjoy that at all. Why am I doing this again? Why am I doing this again? Because now you're talking to product managers, and now you're talking to stakeholders, and now you're giving me what I need to go tell the CEO what's happening and how exciting it is and how they should get on board with more money and more people and all of that kind of stuff. And the other thing that this did is it just showed the whole company what was actually going on in the company in the way that roadmaps and spreadsheets and Jira and all of that never, ever will. Because what they saw was videos of users saying things, and then designs and prototypes of user flows. And it made people go, why are we doing this project? Oh, that thing. Oh, this new thing just happened over here. You're going to want to know about that. Oh, our projects overlap. We should talk about that. Or, I didn't think this was the direction we were going as a company. What's going on? That visual and that user-centered way of communicating brings together all of these people, stakeholders, product managers all the time, commercial folks all the time going, hang on a second, I have 50 questions. That's a good thing, right? Because it means that UX is the catalyst for those conversations that make the company better. Like, that's super powerful if you can get there one day, right? And you don't need any permission to do it, just do it. Just send out some emails. No one is saying you can't send out any emails. Please, no one. No one got fired for sending an email going, look at some cool work. Last bit, bonus round. Probably got time. UX is creative problem solving. There's not much to this. There's one example. It's the bonus round. Once you've done all of that and everything is beautifully mature and lovely, it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks from now, probably. You're gonna, no pity laughs. Okay, that's fine. You're then going to think, right, okay, how do we start to move forward from here? How do we start to see UX, design, research, whatever, as creative problem solving across the business? It can solve any kind of problem. See, once you show less experienced folks that they are just creative problem solvers and not a designer or a researcher or whatever, can change the way they look at every problem, every single problem. So I have one example. This is the application interview process for a job at one of the companies that I was at. It was the same for research, writing, and product design. Obviously with some slight differences. And this went from application triage to review panel, case study, into 2 kind of final stage interviews back to back, and then a debrief and a hiring manager decision. And we got to who's going to be in them and what are we going to be assessing in each one, so we're not asking the same questions 4 times over. This came from about 12 months, probably, of like tiny little pieces here and there. About 12 months of going, right, our interview process isn't really working. We're not really getting the candidates we want. We're not getting them through fast enough, and we're not making all the right decisions when we hire people, and then we're not onboarding them that well. What are we going to do about that? So it started off with every new researcher that came into the business had to learn the tools. So there's a lot of tech involved in like remote research and that type of thing. Instead of doing it with real users and getting them all frustrated and bored, they would do it internally on a project. So the first one was we gave them a project saying, right, go and talk to people we've hired in the last 3 months and talk to them. Do user interviews, because you're a researcher. Go and do some research about that process. They journey mapped it, they user interviewed it, they did empathy maps, they did all of these things. Then we did it with the onboarding process, the first 90 days. We did it with our hiring website. We did it piece by piece by piece. We prototyped, we iterated, we put something out there, we looked at data, we used a system for hiring where candidates came in and you could look at the flow of candidates and how fast and how effective and all of that kind of stuff. It's just a design problem. It's just a UX problem, right? We gathered user needs, we prototyped some stuff, we put it out there, and then we iterated on it. You can do that with anything. You can do it with finance processes if you want. And if you can get to the point where the company goes, right, we need some creative problem solving here, let's get the UX team in, you've won. That's the end of it, right? But you can do all of this. You don't need permission to do that in your own team or something like that or some other process. Go do it. Show why that's so valuable. This saved us, like we could point to the amount of time saved, the amount of talent acquisition partner time saved, the quality of candidate that we hired, the amount of people that didn't pass or did pass probation versus didn't, except, you know, and then tenure and all these types of things. Super, super useful. That's a bonus round because we're a ways off that at the moment. One more time, say it with me. You don't need permission. You don't need any permission to do any of those things. Do not sack off all the work that you have to deliver to do them, but you can find ways to do little pieces, or you can sit by and go, oh, this is crap. Boring. Very, very boring. I'd really like to have a long conversation about this now. We've got at least half an hour. Happy to talk in more specifics. I didn't really have a lot of examples in there. Everyone's different. Clio is hiring at the moment. We are hiring in my team currently for a product designer, and we will be looking for researchers and UX writers very, very soon as well. There are also lots of PM and engineering and various other things going on. We are a growing company. Also, our TikTok's quite funny sometimes, if you're not old like me. And yeah, thank you.
Andy. That's really interesting. I'm sure there's plenty of questions and discussion points in there. So fire away. Go for it.
So we're just we need the mic, please, Alan. Oh, it's there. Oh, it's there. Sorry, my bad. I've been told to tell you the mic is not amplified, so you're going to still have to shout at me, but then that records it for the video.
Fantastic. Hello and thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks for the fantastic talk. My question is about the metrics. So you mentioned in one of the slides, like a good way to kind of draw attention to the UX team is by saying, we will improve user retention by Y%, et cetera, et cetera. But truth is there are many different KPIs. So what are the ones that you use? I was especially curious because you mentioned that you work in a conversational AI company. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit across the actual design bit, but also if you do any other, if your design is other than visual, like conversational design, I'd also be interested in hearing about that. Thank you.
Okay, so the first part of the question is what kind of KPIs do I use to measure the impact of UX in an organization? Is that fair? Okay. That massively depends. So I'll give you some examples. Well, actually, are you in a position to tell me what your 3 organizational objectives are at the top level or not? You can say no. I don't know how private that is.
I actually can, yeah.
Okay. So give me.
Well, usability.
So what's the objective?
What do you mean?
So usability is.
Well, to make the customer's life easier.
Okay. And do you have, sorry.
Help them get to their destination in a less stressful way.
Okay, so helping the users get to their destination more easily is one of the objectives of the company. Okay. Do you have measures of success around what that means as a company?
So as a company, I would need to think, but I can say for the department I work for.
Okay.
We do have KPIs, and it's actually one of the hot topics.
Right. Okay. Is what KPIs?
I'm very curious. I'm very curious to hear your take on that.
Okay. So some examples, depending on the organization and what you're trying to achieve. I think the thing is, if your organization's objectives are very focused on, let's say, retention over acquisition, your KPIs need to be also around retention, right? I think what we do a lot of the time is we go, ooh, shiny. Designers are terrible for this. I'm so bad for it. So bad. Ooh, shiny. Ooh, acquisition. Ooh, over here, this looks cool. Like, acquisition's good for a company, right? And it is good for a company, but it's not one of our focuses right now. So you're actually going off and proving the impact of something that the company doesn't really care about. So if we're talking about usability in general, things that I have had reasonably good success with. So you can go from like super blunt instruments like NPS, right? So you can have an NPS question at the end of each of your core journeys, say. And you can look at affecting that NPS over time. That is a very blunt instrument, but often NPS is already built into products and something you can start or you've already been tracking, you can start thinking about today. At Fangio, we brought in a framework called SuperQ, which is SUPRQ, just in the last sort of year that I was there. And that measures a lot of different metrics around usability, but also around desirability and aesthetics and all these different parts of, let's call it, user experience. It's a much more involved survey that you have to run, but it is really worth looking at and at least looking at the constituent parts of that. And it's a much sharper instrument because there are different pieces to it. You can also sometimes benchmark against other companies in your, or other organizations in your sphere with SuperQ to see how that's working out. That can be really useful. You could just look at conversion rates from step to step within each of your core journeys. I think the first thing is you go into a lot of companies, you say, right, okay, we're going to measure our core journeys. What are they? They're like, well, what? Right? you need to know what those are first. You need to, as a company, not as a team, as a company, these are the three things, the three user journeys or whatever it is that we care about the most right now. If we can nail these three, organization succeeds. Everything else we'll figure out later. It's so, so important. And if you can get to that point, then you can start tracking the analytics on all of those relatively easily, hopefully, depending, right? Legacy and all that. And you can start to look at, okay, where are the drop-offs? How do we journey map that? How do we bring users in and have them walk through these flows with us so that we can get some qual to go with that quant? How do we then think about improving step 3 to step 4? There's like a 50% drop-off. Why is that happening? Right, so we've been told it is by the quant. Maybe the qual will tell us why that's happening and maybe start to think about what possible solutions are to bring that from 50 to 75 or change the flow entirely. But you as a UX team can do that because that's a user experience problem. Unless it's like a giant bug that engineering fix, right? But UX still went into that because you still had to go find out why that was happening in the first place. Those conversion charts and those journey maps and looking at those analytics can be a really, really easy way to start doing that. Because like the example that I had there, if you think that you can just eke out another 1% of conversion from step 1 to complete, right? And you know that 1% is $1 million in revenue in the next year, you can say, well, we got you 3%. That's $3 million of extra revenue we got you. Can we have some more people, please? That stuff can be super easy depending on your setup. So there's probably some examples. There are lots of things. It depends what you're trying to track. So I was looking at a piece of software the other day. It's really interesting that tracks your component usage from your design system within your code base, right? And gives you analytics about the usage of your design system. If that is really, really important to your UX team right now is adoption of a design system, then that's what you should probably be focused on. Because then you can point to developer efficiency, you can start to quantify, and you can do surveys with engineers, and you can say, how much do you think this saves you in time every month? Right, okay, well, engineers get paid a lot of money, so let's take an average engineer salary and times that by how many minutes, hours, days we think are saved across a team of 5, 50, 500. There's your savings again. Can we have some more people, please? Can we have some more money, please? There are loads and loads of KPIs. It really, really depends. But it has to ladder up to what the company objectives are. And therefore, you need them to be super clear. They're not always super clear.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Rashmi.
I think I need the mic, but yeah. Oh, yes. Hi, Andy. Thanks very much for that. So you spoke a little bit about quality, yes. Right? Now, because I work a lot in the public sector, and things I find are so much easier a battle in public sector because you've got service assessments to pass every phase in your development. How do you do the same sort of rigor in non-public sector work? And who's responsible for it? How can you be the only person shouting for it?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, how do you bring the same level of rigor to private companies or organizations in terms of quality as, say, somebody following a GDS framework in the public sector? Okay, right, okay. So this is something that I am actually implementing right now. So I work at a company that was particularly focused on a specific objective for the last sort of 18 months for very, very good reasons. Some of the quality through growth and not sharing learnings as well as we could and not having the best oversight sometimes and just not focusing on speed over quality at times, which was the right thing for the company at the time. We're now trying to steer that back in the right direction and bring in both, right? So there's a few things. So you asked who's I guess responsible for that. Everyone's responsible for it. That's not an easy sell, right? It's like UX. UX is everyone's problem. It's everyone's challenge, even if there's a department called something along those lines. Same with accessibility, same with brand, right? There's always a brand team, but everyone should be involved in brand, because brand is not just the logo or the aesthetics or whatever. Brand permeates everything. So quality does too. So some of the things that we're doing, we're setting up definitions of done for work that's going to ship. It sounds very, very boring, but essentially looking at quality gates. I'm mad keen on that as a term, but setting up those assessments a little bit like GDS frameworks or those types of things, where we are saying to teams, this is what we expect quality to look like, right? So we're actually starting with the chapters. So the product design, UX research, UX writing, marketing design, those are my 4 teams, but also engineering, product management, data, all of those teams. But especially I would say probably design and engineering, because that's generally where the quality starts to fall apart a little bit. And we're working with those teams to say, okay, in design, what does good look like? What does a good shipped product look like? What is the bar of quality? It's quite hard to define, but you can do it. Same in engineering. Then we bring that together and we're working with the squads, who are cross-functional teams, to say, this is what we expect. This is part of your performance. Like, you are assessed on whether you can deliver quality product or not. It's not as simple as that, but it can be. What we're also doing is we now have a quality OKR in the company. So specifically around quality, it's we work in 4-month terms rather than 3-month quarters. But this term that goes up to the end of the year is sort of a dry run. We're going to get some really good stuff done, but it's not going to be massively accountable. From term 1 next year, each squad will have a quality OKR alongside their other OKRs. I'm doing things like I've got a bi-weekly meeting going with a rep from each of the departments, and we're going through our App Store reviews, Play Store reviews, NPS qual feedback, social apps, bugs tracked, and various other things, and prioritizing those in various different ways against like a sort of RICE framework, for instance, right? And saying, who is going to take this one? How are we going to farm it out to a team? Who's going to be accountable? Accountability is really the thing that's normally missing, right? So but you have to put that on right from the top. So you need to make me as a VP accountable for what my team do, right? So my success is based on what they do. And then I need to make my managers accountable for their smaller teams, and so on, so that we can hold people to account on this stuff. Like, it's a slow burn, it's a soft approach, right? You don't just go in super hard, but that's really, really important. So we come out of those bi-weekly meetings with a list of very clear actions of who is owning which of these pieces, and whether it's like, go farm it out to a team because we know what's wrong and it's a bug and it just needs fixed, right through to like, we've seen a massive increase in App Store negative reviews about X feature and we don't know why. Okay, so who's accountable for taking that to the research team, say, and going and do some research and those types of things? It's not easy, but those are some of the things that you want to do. One of the companies I worked in, I went in and we had this bug where a client was, so it was a B2B business, and a client was complaining that one of their customers couldn't fill in a form. And I took it to an engineering team and I said, right, okay, so this is happening, and big client, and looks like it might be a problem. Well, what browser are they using? Well, I don't know. It's a customer of a client of a what? I can't do anything about that. Okay, cool. Can you give me the list of like what browser versions we support, so I can go back to them and say this is what we support? Is it part of that or not? What do you mean? Right, now that's the level that we can go to. So you've got to start building up those practices and those processes to get to that point where everybody cares about quality. But to some extent, there's got to be a carrot and a stick there, I think. So OKRs is one way of doing it, but then that's That's because we have buy-in right from the CEO to go push that, and then me to go do that with some experience, whereas I think they've tried it before and it hasn't really worked out for various reasons.
Comprehensive.
Thank you.
Any more questions or thoughts for Andy?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura. I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about all this process that you did to improve the hiring, do you have any tips in terms of anything that you found that really changed your hiring or made it better? So at the moment I have to hire and I'm starting from scratch. So I'm starting with the whole competency process and things like that. And I found that to be very overwhelming. So any tips on that? That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I could write a book on this. There's a lot there. So I would start with, what I guess I found was start with mapping out those journeys, right? So candidate comes to website, let's say, and finds job ad, right? What does that look like? What's the form look like? Where does that go? Do they get an email saying, thanks for, we've received your application? What does that email look like? What does it say? Whose name is on it from 6 years ago? That kind of thing happened, right? And then, because we had, at the time, I guess, like we had Greenhouse, which is like a hiring system where all the applications go in and you can move them through funnels and that kind of thing. But then we also had coordinators who were manually setting up interview sessions with people, and they were telling a slightly different story. And then we moved to remote in 2020, and I guess we'd done a lot of this work, but then we had to do some of it again because almost everything was in person, and then suddenly it wasn't. So suddenly you have to get people onto Zoom, and you have to make sure that they're ready with Zoom and that they've set their permissions to share their screen, because then you have to restart in Zoom, and thinking through all of those problems, interviewing people who've been hired in the last, ideally you've got a bunch of people who've been hired in the company in the last 3 months. If you haven't, like 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, like how was that experience? What was weird? What didn't work? Those types of things. I think, looking at that map again, if we go back to it here, for instance, who was in these sessions was really important. So we found that we had these random people in these random sessions, and you were getting this very kind of subjective feedback. So we standardized that. We put in things like, for instance, in the application review panel, instead of me or the hiring manager, whoever, triaging all those applications, we had 4 people do it. So there was a triage to get rid of like people who are not suitable, completely not suitable. But then we had 4 people, fairly senior people from very diverse backgrounds in the team, reviewing that blind, each one of them. And then me or whoever was the hiring manager would take those 4 pieces of feedback and make a decision to move them into an interview or not, right? So you're starting to try and take some of the bias out of it. Kickoff meetings, which are not in here at all, hyper important. Getting everybody who's going to be hiring on the same page and saying, this is what we're looking for. This is what I am looking for. I'm the hiring manager. This is how we're going to make the decisions about this. So with us, it was like if I was the hiring manager, and then I had like directors who would be hiring managers. But if it was me, which in the early days it was, I would take everyone's feedback, but I was making the decision. And I made it very clear that that's how the decision was going to be made. I think that's good in any kind of decision-making situation, by the way. Somebody taught me that a long time ago. Saved me a lot of heartache. But then talking about, okay, for this role, we're looking for someone with this type of experience. We're looking for someone at this level. We're looking for a mid-level researcher. And that means these things. It doesn't mean these things, because you're a lead researcher and you want to be reflected back exactly you. That's not helpful, right? We want a great all-rounder. Well, okay, this person who's interviewing is really not an all-rounder. They're very deep into a specific focus. And again, they want that reflected back. So making that really, really clear to people. And then this bit here, which we spent quite a lot of time tweaking over the years and iterating on, which is, what are we assessing in each of these stages? Because how many times have you been in an interview process and you get asked the same question in 3 different interviews, and it's just demoralizing, right? It's confusing. You're like, did they not believe me the first time? Did they just not talk to each other? If they don't talk to each other, does that mean there's no collaboration in this company? Do I even want to work here? You know, like it's all about candidate experience and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, what we are, but what we are not assessing in this, right? So if you're looking at the case study and experience review, we are not looking at coaching is one of those. Let's say coaching, right? Don't ask them about that. We don't need to know that. Someone else who's been tasked with that will ask that in a different session. And these, by the way, are all mapped to our career framework. So these were the items in our career framework. So we said, right, okay, there's whatever there is, 10 items, space them out, do this here, and this here. And then we had people feedback, right, functional knowledge, what did you think? Complexity, dealing with complexity, how was that? Dealing with scope and process, how was that? So space by space by space, getting really granular with it. This takes a long time to really, really get good at, but if you can say, right, this is what good looks like, break it down, tell everyone that's exactly what we're looking for, have different people assess different pieces of it, you're a lot of the way there. And you can do that without research and all of that kind of stuff, right? You're gonna have to wing it to start with. But as long as you iterate super quickly, and do you have like a talent acquisition partner to help you, or are you doing all of this like?
No, I have a partner. So it's a hiring manager, and so I think the problems that I had, I don't want to take like everybody's time on discussing more, but maybe somebody had the same problem. And so I interviewed maybe people, and I think they were right for the role, but then somebody else interviewed them, I don't know, my manager, and decided that, no, this candidate is totally unsuitable when it was suitable for me. Yeah. And I had probably no framework for understanding, you know, it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't know how to fix that problem or what to do about it.
So you've got a hiring manager above you who's interviewed some people who you thought were right for the role, and then they have felt like that's not the case, and you haven't had the kind of framework to. I'm just repeating for the room.
Somebody who's different I just decided that I want to hire for a different role, and this person that you sent me is totally unsuitable.
Yeah.
When I had interviewed this person, and I told them, I didn't tell them that they got the job, but I gave them like very good feedback. So I was, not in the moment. Okay,
you gave them feedback afterwards, positive feedback, okay. So I mean, there's a bunch of stuff here, right? So you want to? Oh, do we? Okay, I thought we had till 8:15. Sorry, my bad. Right. Okay. So user needs, right? Your user is your hiring manager, your manager, right? If they're the ultimate decision maker, what are they looking for in this role? Write it down. They're not going to write it down. When they do, it's going to be rubbish. So interview them, ask them what their user needs are, and then try and translate that. Play it back to them. Always play it back to them, and they go, yeah, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Who's the decision maker? Is it them or you? Make it super clear. Make them make that decision. If it's them, fine, but then they're kind of on their own to some extent, right? Or not on their own, but it becomes a very different dynamic. So there's a lot of things that it happens a lot. Not being on the same page from the start is what kills it every single time. And people just get so upset, and they're like, I'm not working with that person, and all of these types of things. Whereas if you can make it very, very clear from the start, it is really hard, but will pay itself off very, very quickly. We can maybe go into some of this later. Do we have to wrap up, do we? Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Andy. Thanks. I never thanked you, Andy. So. Thanks to everyone else. Thanks to you all for coming. We'll continue the evening, I think, in the hostelry. Which
hostelry shall we frequent this evening for alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages?
Indeed. Brewdog.
No. Hard pass.
Okay. Where's the next nearest?
Sorry, I don't do Brewdog.
You don't do Brewdog?
You know.
Red Squirrel.
Red Squirrel, there you go. Yes, right across the road. I would love to talk to all of you. Every single one of you. Thank you all. Whatever. It's all good.
Clear out by half.